came from a neighborhood that folks are racially profiled and brutalized by the police department, come from a neighborhood where the economic gap is so large if you go 10 miles away from it. That perspective and that experience allowed me to talk to people where they are and give people a better understanding on where we need to be. And so a lot of folks get into politics and it's all about money, right? They play into the corporations, they play into the donors. But what happens is they never actually solve the real problems in those communities. And until you tap into the folks who have those experiences and put them folks in power, whether it's the chief of staffs or the deputies right up under, or it's the folks that are running for office, you'll never be able to tackle the real problems of America. And that's why we're still where we are today after all of these years.
Yeah, I think classism is, I mean, it's not the conversation we're having today, but, you know, with Mark and Reggie's consent, I would love to have that conversation one day about classism and what that, you know, what it means, what it looks like.
Yeah, but because I have, and I'm sorry, because I have, you know, when you're talking about representation in government, you know, I got Black friends who I had to talk to about my experience, who come from a more elite community, right? And so at the end of the day, like I said, the perspective and is so important of who is in those positions, not just the color, right? Because I know many Black folks who I would say if they was in this position and they had to make these decisions, they wouldn't make the best decisions because they haven't experienced these problems. And that's what you see today. Even the Black folks that are in power now, most of those Black folks have not come from nothing. And they came from something or came from a family of riches, or they didn't grow up in these hoods, which is why they can't solve the problem, because they don't have the connection, because they don't have the experience. And that's why they can't analyze and make the best decisions for these communities.
I hear that. So question, so I'm going to switch a little bit here. And this question, Lindsay, I'd like for you to tackle this initially. Is it important for Black folks to be inclusive of the gender and sexual orientation spectrum within Black culture?
Thank you for that question. I just want to articulate, even in this discussion as we're having, Black people are not a monolith. We come in all different shapes, sizes, different ideas, different socioeconomic backgrounds. So in terms of inclusion in any level, if any group of people are a part of our culture, we need to respect their voice, their agency. And I want to speak specifically, people of the LGBT community have been brutalized at the hands of cisgender people in our community. And they are a part of our community. They are a part of our culture, and their stories need to be told. So they be represented and protected and given agency, just as everyone else in our community is.
I hear you. I think that's, that conversation sometimes gets lost, I think, when we're talking about these things. And so I do think that's an important part of the narrative. I have been lately seeing the hashtag All Black Lives Matter, because there have been some issues of some Black trans folks being murdered, and there were a lot of them actually. And so there have been conversations about it. Does anybody else have thoughts about that? Uh-oh. Hello?
Yeah, I guess I'll hop in.
My computer froze, so I wasn't sure if anybody was talking. Yeah. Okay, you're back now. Somebody. Who's talking?
Tucson, EJ. Yep.
All right, go ahead.
I do believe, and I'm just going to be very, very brief. I do believe that the conversation about culture, the conversation about Black culture, it does, to me, I don't see the difference. It does include LGBTQ plus people if we're talking specifically about, Black people who identify as that, I believe it includes them as well, because just because I or whoever, we may not necessarily like identify as that, it does not exclude their Blackness. And I believe as long as that is the shared like commonality, then there should be some, you know, inclusion of that. Now I'm not as knowledgeable about like, LGBTQ, like, movement and like, their fight for equality up to this point. And I do know that there are some people who believe that it is, a bit of a divergent. It does kind of take away from the conversation that we're having specifically about Black people experiencing slavery and oppression in the hands of like, America. But I do believe that in terms of culture, there is a space, there should be a safe space for them to have that conversation and be able to, talk about their collective experiences as well. Because like I said, although they may identify as LGBTQ plus, they are still Black. So yeah, that's my.
So I want to ask you a bit, I mean, kind of that same lane, but I want to pose this to Lindsay and Shay and ask you, like, living at any intersection brings different realities, right? So Black is definitely a broad umbrella. Everybody who identifies as Black. And I'm not comparing anything to systemic oppression. I don't think there's anything comparable. But when you think about as Black women, as Black cisgender women who live in this country, living at the intersectionality of being Black and female, do you find yourself dealing with different complications? Do you feel like, your Black conversation, your woman conversation are separate ones? Do they overlap? Like, how do each of you feel about that?
So for me, like I said, I'm being in a predominantly white program, and it's for females. I cling more to my African American students to have that conversation. And now I've kind of tried to break out a little bit to start reaching out to my white classmates a little more and seeing their point of view. A lot of my classmates have been reaching out to me. It's been very weird a little bit because a lot of them have been apologizing for things that are out of my control. And I understand like they care, but I do feel like you have that woman voice and then that African American voice. It's a difference. Sometimes you have to turn it on and turn off, and I'm learning that more and more as I get older, to be mindful of what I put out. I think that makes sense.
It does make sense. No, it makes sense. Lindsay?
Yeah, to capitalize on that, I was just like quickly trying to Google it. Malcolm X quoted this: "The most disrespected person in America is a Black woman."
Yeah.
I think, as you were speaking to earlier, that intersectionality, we are oppressed because of sexism, patriarchy, and also because of our Blackness. As you see, and as we have witnessed recently on social media, Black women being brutalized at the hand of Black men. We have to bear the brunt of carrying our community, fighting for justice within our community and outside of our community. So there is oppression on multiple ends as a Black woman. Particularly, I can think about my professional experiences and feeling oftentimes when I am standing next to a Black man, hoping that they would lend me a hand of support and not really feeling that in professional spaces, and having to fend for myself inside the community and outside the community against different types of oppression.
I think that's so important, because one of the things that I notice in all that's happening, and we all very familiar with police brutality, and from you guys specifically, like Laquan McDonald, and we can go down the list of Eric Garner and Tamir Rice and George Floyd and et cetera, right? But doing some research 2 weeks ago, I found that there were, I won't say as many, but there were a significant number of Black women who had been brutalized or died at the hands of police. And I didn't know their names. Like, they weren't covered in the media. If you search the Twitter hashtag, you might see a little bit, but it didn't get the level of coverage that was happening. And so my question to any of the guys or ladies who want to answer this, do you think there is a difference in how media coverage happens over Black women being brutalized, and how people inside the Black community lift those things or highlight those things when they happen?
Definitely. I mean, definitely. Okay. And the truth of the matter is I share the sentiments of Lindsay, on this, is that, Black women have been under attack for, a long time. But the way that they've made it harder is by attacking Black men. And so throughout the years, even when you look at a past generation where, we had providers of black males were the sources of income, they were taken down when it came to preventing them, putting barriers in front of them to be able to do that. And when they went around those barriers, there were laws put in place so that they can increase the prison population. And so then that forces Black women to be at the helm of families, working harder than ever. And at the end of the day, we got to understand that it's true. Black women are under attack, and Black men are, they've looked to extinct Black men to make it even harder. And so even today, when you're talking about media, Black men being killed or Black men, anything against a Black man is covered so that they can show that they've done something. And I'll just stop there instead of, I don't want to go a little bit deeper into that, but I'll stop.
So you
there.
said, I'm not letting you off the hook like that, because you made an assertion. I'm not a Black woman, so I'm let the Black women speak. But you not let them, but I would like to hear their perspective. You made an assertion about Black women attacking Black men. Were the words you used? Yeah.
No. I'm saying that they are under. Black women are undervalued and definitely under attack. But what I'm saying is they've done that by attacking Black men.
When you say they, who do you mean?
Black men. What I mean by the systems in power, what I mean by American capitalists, by all of the systems that have been put in place, they understood that the Black man was the way to tear down families. And then Black women were still, well, that's all I'll say. Go ahead.
So let me ask, this is good. I like this kind of talk. Let's stir the pot. Yeah. So do you think that anybody can answer? Do you think that families that are led by single Black women are weaker families, or that women are weaker leaders?
No.
Oh Lord, I ain't want to go down this route.
Oh, this is good. This is what we're here for, Jamal.
I am raising a Black man. I was a single parent. His father is present and he has a stepfather. But for years, I watched my mother do everything by herself. She has 2 kids that work for the state. I hold 4 degrees. Mama worked night and day to put 4 kids through school and made sure we never suffered. She might have her hardships, but she made sure we was always good. And sometimes, I look at it like this. I have friends who come from a 2-parent household and friends that come from a single parent household. What's the difference? Extra money? Love? Because blood don't make you family.
So I totally disagree with half that statement. And here's why. Here's why. And because on the surface, that sounds great, right? But the reality is that families are about economics. In America, that's what families are about. And families are about that when you're talking about creating generational wealth, when you're talking about opening up opportunities for your family, when you're talking about being able to sustain your family over a period of time, families are about economics. So if you want to talk about a single parent household being weak, and I'm talking about a single parent without help, then yes, economically, they are weak. You don't have 2 incomes. You don't have 2 credit scores. You don't have 2 people that are able to, a person that's already to open up a business or whatever the case is. You have a person that is holding everything on their back, working a job that may not be paying what they need to be paid. And essential, Black folks get the essential jobs because of these barriers. And now they're paycheck to paycheck, barely being able to give to their family. And then when they're doing that, that means that they're not able to be flexible and create time, because they prevented us from creating generational wealth. And so when you are in a position where you're working in a central job, now what that does is not only take you're not able to put enough resources into your family, but you're also not able to put enough time, and this comes with education and everything else, with uplifting and bringing up your children. So a single parent is definitely weaker than two parents. Yes, that's why they were able to put us in this position that we are in today, is because they knew how to split up the families. Does that go against single mothers? No, I was raised with a single mother. I understand that they had to do what they had to do, but in reality, that it's still destabilized the family, and that's just that's the overall point.
Okay, I hear that. So I think that's very interesting. This is a very interesting conversation. I think that TJ, feel free to jump in. Lindsay, feel free to jump in. I think that I think both things can be true. So, Shay's experience is her experience, and so I think that her experience is as valuable and valid as anyone else's. I am a product of a single parent household. I realize that my father being in the home would not have been good for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm an example, I'm an anecdote, right? But I'm an example where a two-parent household with that particular person would not have been in my best interest. So I was better off with my mom, grandmother, great-grandmother, like these Black women raising me, and I don't feel deficient in any way because I think I turned out okay, right? Where you could have that. And I think, to your point, sometimes we're arguing an idea that's not necessarily based in reality for everybody, right? Because two parents doesn't necessarily mean you have two parents who are healthy, who are going to pour into you, who are going to, you know what I'm saying? As opposed to sometimes having one parent who gives you exactly what you need. As it relates to the income determination you made, let's say you have two parents, to your point, Jamal, who are great parents. They do all the things you need your parents to do. And they have, but they're not wealthy, right? They're just okay. Or you have one parent who has the affluence and influence of Oprah Winfrey. Is one of those situations better than the other, TJ or Lindsay?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can say better. I think I agree with what you said just a moment ago. Like I use this word again, is nuance, right? It depends on your individual experience. So the idea that a household is weaker because it's led by a woman is straight from patriarchy. It's a sexist kind of mentality. The best homes are healthy homes. That's healthy economically, that's healthy emotionally, that's healthy spiritually, that's healthy educationally. And so just because you come from affluence and your family has a bunch of money doesn't mean that they can be there for you and or are there for you in the other ways that a child needs in order to develop in a way that is emotionally healthy. There are times where there are two parents in the household, and like you say, the rearing experience is negative for a child. And so I think like the idea is, how do we create healthy homes in the situations that we are given?
That's interesting. TJ, you have any thoughts?
I'm conflicted. Like,
that's even better.
I'm just so conflicted. Like
all of this stuff is right. Like,
this is more interesting.
It all depends on perspective. It's just like, it depends on the perspective. And honestly, like, I mean, I'm not gonna chisel at what Lindsay was saying, chisel at what Jamal was saying. Like, it's just like, because I agree with them both. But one of the things that is like coming to my mind so clearly to me is I attended Morehouse. And one of the classes that I enjoyed was the psychology of the African American experience. Now,
you're not gonna give me a Morehouse brother like moment. Like I'm trying.
What's going on, bro?
Sorry, go
ahead. Yeah, one of the classes that I thoroughly enjoyed was the psychology of the African American experience, which I thought, I was like, okay, okay, I'm taking this class, and after this, I'm gonna go, like, you know, be an African studies, like, you know, major, whatever. What it was a breakdown of the psychology and a breakdown of philosophy of Western civilization versus the Eastern civilizations, like ancient, like, you know, African civilizations, like Kemet, and like all of these, if we just keep it within the context of, like, you know, the African, like, you know, experience, it was very matriarchal. It was, everything came through the lineage of the woman. Like, it was very, that even the next king, the next leaders, like, it all came through the woman. But then when we got transported over here in America, we adopted a lot of Eurocentric ideas, a lot of patriarchal ideas. And so it's just like I said, I'm just like, I'm conflicted, because it is a matter of perspective. But it is very interesting to me that who we are as African people, like, you know, in the diaspora, they removed us, but they weren't able to remove us. So we still, the blood memory that we carry from our ancestors is still rooted in us. It's still deep inside of us. And so it's just really interesting that, to me, it's like we're fighting with this double consciousness, like, you know, that Du Bois talked about. And it's like we're African and we're both American, and it's this conflicting thing, like that is going on within us. But I believe in the economics of 2-parent households, but I also believe in, like, you know, it being I myself am a product of a single parent, you know, household, but I also believe in, like, morale and, like, you know, rearing, and if in fact, like, a 2-parent household could potentially not be, like, you know, well for like, you know, child rearing, depending on who it is. I don't know, man. It's just so,
can I say,
it's so intricate. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, TJ, look, so I'm with some everybody on this, but here's my thing, and I want to make this clear: single parent households could be a male at the head or a woman at the head, and so I make that clear. Number two is, when you're talking about, like you talked about your dad, and you said that, you know, it wouldn't be the best 2-parent household situation. You know, now you're diving into the root problems on why these people even broken in the first place, to where it wouldn't have been a great 2-parent household. So now you're diving into why parents are not able to be there for their kids, why parents are not able to provide for their kids, why that with the economic gap, why parents have it could be a disorder, and now you're talking about mental health. And so I think that if Black people were always were treated with equity and equality and all these things we're fighting for today, like if it was the other way around, then you would have more households with healthier households where 2 parents have great economic status, and you wouldn't have a lot of fathers or mothers in these terrible situations where they can't be there for their kids, or it's not healthy, or it's domestic abuse, or it's this type of abuse, or this and this. And all of those are problems that I think were caused for us.
Yeah, it was definitely systemic. I agree with you. Like, a lot of the issues that Black people, we didn't just wake up like this. You know what I'm saying? This was this was centuries of like psychological abuse, mental abuse, so like it's like degradation of the soul, like issues that we've been experiencing. So I do understand that it is a greater, like, you know, reason. It's systemic. It's racism. It's anti-Blackness. It's, you know, white rightness. Like, you know. So yeah, I'm just
I think you all. I mean, I love this conversation. I think it's so important to discuss and to hear these varying views, because we are also talking through the complexities of what happens when you have hundreds of years of oppression that also includes some being miseducated, you know, in ways around patriarchy, sexism, and misogyny, or misogyny war, specifically talking about Black women. So you do have, there are, you know, a multiplicity of things that we're talking through, I think, and working through as people. And while we are having conversations right now in the country and around the world about Blackness and the oppression of Black people globally, I think that we do have to, you know, walk and chew gum and not, you know, do so while being silent on issues that affect, women, specifically Black women. So let me turn.
Ted. So I think what I'm getting from it is that experiences shape your entire life. So like our experiences are so different that we begin to sort of draw off of each other. So where your single parent home didn't work, the next person's did. Where that two person's home didn't work, the single parent's home did work. And I think those experiences is definitely what helps shape the African American culture and why we have the ability to struggle and then get through to the next step. And we just have it's sort of deep down in our soul. We just have the ability to make it through. And that's a culture thing that maybe even whites may not even understand. But I just wanted to say that.
But other cultures don't go through what we went through. Yeah. And so that's why it's so important for us to understand that we have hundreds of years of oppression, of abuse, of all of these different things on why we can't even, don't have as many healthy two-parent households. Even if you look at other cultures, there are way more in another culture because they were more privileged to have things that we weren't, because they were not oppressed the way that we are. And so, that's why when we look at why can't we look, if we just took two parents and said, why can't they work together? You will see root problems that we haven't addressed as America, that is affecting one or two of those parents. And that is the reason why they are this way and why these families won't be healthy, which is what they've made for us and designed for us in the first place. They studied Black men and women since the beginning of time, especially after slavery, and they studied how can they put the chains on our brains and break up the families, and they did it.
I think that's a really important point, Jamal, and I think to what TJ is saying, I think TJ was speaking to it more in a macro context, like about Black people, and what you're talking about is more micro in terms of individuals. And to TJ's point, nobody just wakes up like they are, right? Trauma and oppression and like all these things that we're dealing with affect how we show up in the world, and what we bring to the table. Go ahead, Shay.
You got to look at it like this too, and somebody just put in the comments. It's how media portrays the Black community. That plays a major role. We have low-income white families just as well as we do, and I'm speaking because I've worked in them.
Yeah.
But media portrays the Black community so bad. It's horrible. But then they also advertise on TV how these Black mothers make sure these households are straight. And I'm saying again, I am a single parent who has bust her butt and put herself through school for years to make sure my son is never without. Never. It's hard being a Black woman and having to continue to validate everything that you do, every move that you make to everyone you come in contact with. It gets tiring. My grandmother had mental health issues, schizophrenic, bipolar, PTSD, and all, and still made sure her kids were never without. Never. It's gonna get emotional for me, but it's nerve-wracking. We can't downplay a Black sister because she ain't got no man by her side, and you can't downplay a brother because the mother don't want to be there. But more than likely, in 10 times out of 10, you're going to see a Black woman making sure her household is always took care of, regardless if a man is there or not. I worked 2 jobs while putting myself through school, and I had help. I still struggled, but you'll never know. Never. As of now, I have not worked for 2 years. My son has not been without since I have not worked. It's the best bond because he goes through every trial and tribulation I go through because I want him to experience that. Your mother did it and you seen her bust her butt for it, then that means you have to do the same thing vice versa because nothing is never going to come easy. Never.
Can I just say that Black men will be nothing without Black women? That's all I want to say. All right, I'm done.
And I can say amen.
Can I say this to Shay? Like, and to all Black women that are listening, like, you guys are like, I can't even put it into words, like how important Black women are, like how important to our experience, to our identity, like Black women, like, man, like, I think just to, okay, because I'm finding myself all over, like I have so many like thoughts going right now, but to Shay, to Lindsay, my sister, my, like, you know, my mom, my aunts, my sisters, my friends, like, you know, I celebrate Black women, like, you know, Black women, because honest to God speaking, like, we have been taught how to degrade, like, you know, Black women. It was not nothing that we did, like it was taught to us. So we're just regurgitating learned behavior. Everything that we're seeing within the context of the Black culture and community, we're regurgitating like learned behavior from this Americanized system of oppression that we've been under. But if we can move to the African, like, you know, part of us and our identity, the woman is it, bro. Like, y'all are powerful, you're beautiful, you're smart, you're resilient. No other woman could go through the things that Black women have gone through and still be as sane as y'all are right now. Like, yeah, y'all get mad, yeah, y'all turn up, like, yeah, it's in y'all to get like that, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, look at everything that, like, you've gone through. Look at everything that we are going through. Like, it's so, like I said, it's so sticky, but I celebrate, like, you know, Shay, I celebrate your accomplishments. Like, you know, every Black woman that's on here and that's watching, like, and that's where we got to get back to. We got to get back to the love that we have for one another, like, and building each other back up and pulling together the pieces of our lives and our realities that they have completely scattered. Like, it completely scattered. But Black women are definitely like strong and beautiful and resilient, hands down. Like, there is no other woman like the Black woman on the face of this earth, period. Like,
I mean, you had a Black woman trying to free a bunch of scary Black dudes, right, from slavery. So, you know,
it wasn't nothing but 5 feet tall, somewhere around 5 feet tall. Bro. Like, come on, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. But I think what you said is you and Jamal said has been spot on, and I echo those sentiments. I do think that, again, even when we're having these conversations around Blackness, we have to be careful that we still present a unified front as Black people, and that we build each other up, all of us, no matter how we show up in the world. In terms of our Blackness, that we do celebrate and honor. I was joking with some friends the other day, and I was like, bro, like, it's so, I say funny, but not funny, but you know what I mean. Like, if you don't know when Father's Day is, I mean, you just don't even know. It's like a blip on the screen. Like, Mother's Day got like commercials and, you know, just, it's a whole thing.
And they'll show us no love.
When I was, you know, having my mom, grandmother, and fortunately even my great grandmother until 2004, in my life, like, Mother's Day has just always been a huge deal for me personally and for my family. And not that it shouldn't be. I think that it should be, right? And I'm not saying that fathers shouldn't be celebrated, because they should be. Fathers who show up, who are present, and there are many. And there also is not a lot of conversation, in my opinion, around single you know, households that are led by a single father. Like, I have some friends who are fathers to, one of my friends is father to 3 daughters. He's an excellent father to his daughters. So I think we have to also highlight when men who, you know, are doing this on their own, because that happens as well. All right, so I gotta switch, because I know we're running, I don't know how much time we got, but I want to switch to voting right quick. So did we lose Lindsay?
No, did we lose Jason? I have not heard.
I'm here.
Okay, Lindsay's here.
I'm here.
We did lose Jason.
Let me check about Jason. Yeah. Let me interject about Jason, Ted.
Huh?
Let me interject about Jason. So he had a power outage around his house, so he got completely knocked off. So if he's able to come back in, then he'll be back in, guys. So I wanted to interject about Jason. That's why he's not on the call.
Thanks, Mark. So let's talk about voting. Is voting important? And Jamal, we know where you are on this one. So if is voting important? And Lindsay, you haven't talked in a minute. Is voting important? And if so, why?
Yes, voting is essential. I think for me personally, voting is important because it's one way to pay honor and respect to our ancestors who fought, sacrificed their lives, the safety of their families, to ensure that we had the right to participate in this democratic process. But I do believe this is the way in which we select our political officials. And I think that there has been, if voter suppression did not exist, then I would be suspicious of if voting was something that was valuable. But there is a agenda to suppress the Black vote, which lets me know that voting is something that in many ways in our government can impact the way our systems are run and the people who represent us.
I think that's a really important, so what we have seen is statistically, I've seen that, Black voter turnout has fluctuated. And if we can all agree, I'm going to presuppose we can all agree that Black people are more adversely affected by bad policy in America than any other people group, right? And I made this point to somebody, when you talk about Jim Crow era and segregation and redlining and gerrymandering and the like the water fountains, my mom was born in, I hope she didn't mind, born in 52. So she lived in that time, and my grandmother, I think my grandmother's watching, who actually lived in Memphis through segregation. So, the fountains didn't say white and Latinx or white and Asian or white and, whatever they said, white and colored, right? Or white and Black. And so there's been a very specific, intentional oppression of Black people since, we were kidnapped from Africa and brought here. Why do you, given that reality, whoever wants to speak to this, why, with Blacks being more adversely affected, why do you think our voter turnout is not higher?
I'm gonna let one person go, then I'll tell y'all.
Where is Shay?
I feel like.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I feel like it's not something that is pushed as much as it should be within our communities. I feel like Black people have been disenfranchised by, and don't actually trust politics. They don't trust the people who are supposed to represent them, because again, like we've talked about before, representation is directly connected with your experiences. So, I feel like some people don't do it because they don't trust it. They don't feel like that their voice will actually be heard. I know a lot of the millennials that I know all vote, but when I talk to some of the younger people that I know, like Generation Z and stuff like that, they really aren't aren't with it, or at least the ones that I know, they aren't with it because they don't trust it. They don't actually believe that, that it's gonna actually, that their opinion matters. So that, and then there's also been a disenfranchisement, and it's just not pushed as much as it should be, particularly and when you're talking about elected officials and your politicians and knowing who your alderman is and who your judges and all of that stuff. It's not something that is talked about as much. I know now within my family contacts. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't think it's fair that they put all of these people on the ballot when it's time for you to vote. You don't know who half of these people are. Honest to God, it's who are these people? It's hundreds. It be feeling like it's hundreds of people on there. How am I supposed to know all of these people? It just feels I don't know. It feels
that's we're gonna fix some of that tonight.
So let me say this. So a couple of things. All right. So number one is that we've been party programmed. And what I mean by party programmed is that we used to be Republicans before the 60s, Democrats after the Civil Rights Bill was passed. And at the end of the day, we have been programmed to vote Democrat or vote a certain party because we got one piece of legislation, instead of educating people on how voting really works. And the problem is that we'll go to the polls and we'll just vote all Democrat, but we don't know what those Democrats stand for. We don't know. It's just like we talked about representation earlier. You can vote for Clarence Thomas because he Black or because he Democrat, but he'll get up there and he'll do everything against you. And so that's what's been going on all this time, is that we have been party programmed, and we don't understand that we don't have a party in America. And just as, you know, Martin Luther King went to the White House with the opposite party to try to get a bill passed, we got to understand that in America, politics is not designed to work for us. Voting is not designed to work for us. So we have to organize and come together on an agenda that we want, and then vote based on that agenda. If this politician is going to move forward this agenda, then we'll fund and we'll put them in there to move forward that agenda. And until we learn and educate ourselves on how voting works, stop being party programmed, understand that just because they Democrat don't mean that they're good, and understanding we don't have a party in America that really represent our interests, ever represent our interests, then we would never get anywhere. Voter suppression is real, all right? And so with all of these things that have happened, with all of the fact that they don't promote it, with the fact that it's so corrupt, and the fact that we have the Electoral College on a national level, all of these things have made people not want to be involved in a political process, especially young people. Then with the fact that politicians don't move forward bold policies that'll show that they'll change people's lives. And that's another reason why the voters, it has suppressed. I don't agree with the, honestly, I don't agree with the, just tell people to go vote because they ancestors, this, and that. You know, that's not good enough for me, okay? I can tell you to go vote, but you don't even know who you're voting for. I can tell you to go vote, but you're not even educated on what the agenda is. And we got to get to that before we even talk about going to the polls. And this comes from somebody who's deep in politics on the national and local level. We don't go to the table and say, this is our agenda and who we got to go to, the state's attorney, the prosecutors, because really the criminal justice is where we really should be focused, but they don't want us focused on that. Then we need to go this way, and we need to bring somebody up the ranks, and we need to support this person and get this agenda passed.
Yeah, it's the new Jim Crow, man. It's the new Jim Crow.
Well, let me say, that was you preach it, Doc. That was very good.
I ain't starting no church though.
I think that's very good, because one of the things that I learned, I mean, again, it's anecdotal. I have 8 nephews who ask me for money like I'm their father. But very close to the boys. And I was talking to one of them that one day about just government at 16. And he literally did not understand, you know, the House, the Senate, how a bill is written, how a law is passed, like very kind of fundamental things about government and how you should be informed. Say something.
It's Shay. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to cut you off.
No, go ahead. Jump in.
And I agree with that. And I feel that's where the education system lacks at. It was an article I was reading. I've been doing more research since I'm at home and classes are online. And from a man in Georgia in the 1930s, like describing the voting system and like how he had to pay taxes for to vote. The schools don't touch bases on the executive system, judicial, or legislative as much. The only one you really hear about is executive. I didn't know nothing about voting until I got in college. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I had to start doing more research to see like where my beliefs and values reside at. Mm-hmm. We don't prioritize it just because our ancestors didn't have the opportunities to do. The schools need to place it more in, because if you, like I said, 16, 17, 18, not understanding what roles there are that fall under each category, it's a struggle once you get out there.
I think you're exactly right. Like the challenge really is understanding how it works and what means what. So what I tried to do, you know, to give people an example is everybody was talking about George Floyd's death, right? Everybody in the whole world was talking about it. So I was talking to one of my friends and I said, let me help you understand the power of voting. Because I talk to lots of people, millennials and Gen Zers, who are like, they always say, I'm not into politics. And I'm like, okay, you're not. But it affects every area of your life, from how clean the air you breathe is, to how clean the water is you drink out of a fountain, to if an airplane is safe enough when you get on it. There's nothing in your life that's not affected by politics. So we have to, I think, help educate our own communities. If the school's not going to do it, if whomever, Black people have to educate our families and our friends and people within our own sphere of influence to help them understand. So George Floyd was murdered on camera. We all saw it. The first person in an elected position to speak out against that was the mayor of Minneapolis, which clearly had some influence because the police officers were fired the next day. We were then waiting on charges because people always said, we want charges, Breonna Taylor, we want charges. Well, who brings charges? The DA brings charges. The DA is an elected official, right? The DA of Hennepin County is elected official. We saw that happen. If these men go to trial, which they will, they're going to go to a trial and they're going to have a jury. Who's on a jury? Only registered voters. That's how you're chosen for jury selection, is you have to be a registered voter. So when we talk, I mean, my friends like, oh, I hate jury duty. I don't want jury duty. I'm like, yo, you gotta stop. We have to stop demonizing jury duty. Because if you were on trial, who would you want sitting in that jury box? You want somebody who understands you, who understands your living conditions, your lived experiences. And so we have to debunk that. So again, that's another issue with voting, who's in the box. If that jury finds these officers guilty, a judge is likely going to sentence these guys. In many counties and municipalities and states, judges are elected officials. So this entire process is connected to voting. Everything, even around that one example of George Floyd, and we look, obviously out from that to that point. I think Jamal's points were so important to talk about agenda. What is it that we want? Do we then vote for those candidates? Do we then fund those candidates? Do we afterwards hold those candidates accountable? Do we hold their feet to the fire? Do we make sure that they did the things that we want to do? And that's kind of like the way that the Republican narrative was pushed forward. We don't care what Donald Trump does. We don't care what he says. We don't care about anything but the Supreme Court. That's what we want. Because the two picks he had, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, are both in their 50s. They're going to be on the Supreme Court for at least 25 years. At least 25 years. That's the long game that they were thinking about, that sometimes we are not in our own spaces and communities educated enough on to really play the game the same way. This next question is next to the last one is, how should we educate Black people today about voting? How should we get our people more informed about what's going on and how to access the political apparatus? Anybody?
So, I mean, I got to run, but in a second. But I do want to dive into this political talk. But let me say this: really, politics is all about funding. Okay, and at the end of the day, if we're talking about educating people that aren't being educated in the school system, then we're going to have to do the education ourselves. And if we want to educate and reach the masses, then we're going to have to fund it. So it's going to take those Black elite folks or Black elite organizations or folks who have an interest in this community to help us put together what that structure of education looks like and how to get people to understand everything that you just talked about. Because they're not going to do it. They don't even educate in the schools. So if you don't want to do it that way, then the reality is we're going to have to teach our own kids. If we ain't got time to do that because we got all these other problems, is that we got to hold accountable to school districts. So it's like the education has to happen in some way. But at this point, where we are today, is it has to be funded. It has to be organized to be able to reach every age group that we need to, every class group that we need to, so that they can understand what the agenda is, how we're going to organize for it. Bernie Sanders was good with that. I've been on Bernie campaign both times as a spokesman. And so that was something that they were good at, right? Was organizing the agenda and it's only a few items that we want people to think about, and then how to organize for them. All right, who do we target? Who do we vote for? what petition do we send? Whatever the case is, of voting needs to stop being talked about as a ritual for us, you know, or something that let's just go vote. This is just the tradition. Because if you going to just vote and you don't know who you're voting for, you could be voting for somebody that's oppressing you. And so voting should be talked about as what's the agenda? What are we fighting for? How are we going to change things, whether it's on national or the local level? How are we going to change things in these communities? What are we on a national level? How are we going to do this? How do we change the criminal justice system? We need to target the DA. We did that here in Laquan McDonald. My great friend, Kim Foxx, won state's attorney, the first Black woman SA because of us, because we were leading the Laquan McDonald movement at the time that it was an election for state's attorney, and the state's attorney covered up the tape of Laquan McDonald. And so now we had a focus, organizations all across the city. Her name was Anita. We had Buy Anita campaigns, rallies, everything to get the word out, to get the message out, funders, everything, and to the point where she was beat in the biggest landslide victory ever in our DA's office. So it has to be a target. Same with judge. We unseated a judge by the name of Michael Cognan, who was a racist judge. Because there are so many judges on there, they said, all right, well, we can't focus on multiple, but let's target one who have done the worst. We targeted one. It was a huge campaign across the city. It was a lot of funding. It was organizations, from youth organizations on to political organizations, all on the same page. Vote out this man. And they were able to do it. So we got to have a focus. We got to have an agenda. And then that's how we go to the polls.
I hear that. TJ, you said something earlier about there's 100 people, 1,000 people. So I want you and Lindsay to speak to this in whatever order you choose. How do we narrow our focus, kind of to what Jamal's point was, or if you feel like we need to get people to understand who is important to vote for, right? Because I think that, you know, my nephews, they know all the NBA players and all the stats. I don't care what team it is. So I think it's possible to know all the people on the ballot. How do we make that important or doable, or is it even necessary to make it, that?
I don't have the answers. I'm not gonna even front and act like I do. I just
like you got the answer, Sway.
I've seen something like this before where it was something going around on social media, and I didn't know who these people were. It was like a list of judges, and there was some other stuff going on. I think it was something that somebody Black had put together and was like, yo, don't vote for these people. This is what they did. These are, like they're racist, it's blah, 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 right? So I don't know. I feel like something like that, it's helpful. Like if we could just, like you said, or like stats, or like maybe having some sort of idea of who these people, who they are, and then, having a collective sort of like village, if you will, like conversation about, who we're going to, like Jamal was saying, almost like we come together and figure out who is in our best interest as far as like, this particular, ballot, this particular position, and then maybe go about it that way. Outside of that, I have no idea. I just know that it's like extremely overwhelming, like to the point that you don't know. And then like Jamal said, we've been conditioned to vote Democrat. So then you're just going down Democrat. You don't know what you're doing. Like, so it's like, it probably would be better if you didn't even vote. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because it's just, I don't know. And that's my opinion, maybe. But it's just like, I probably would, I would prefer like if you didn't versus putting down a vote for somebody who, you know what I'm saying? It don't have my best interest at heart. Don't like.
I gotta run, guys. But I want to say I appreciate this conversation. Let me just say this. I like what TJ just said.
In the car.
I gotta run because I gotta go into an event. But look, let me just say this though, to what TJ just said. You're right, because the reality is, we've been voting against our interests for so many years that I wish some of these folks wouldn't have voted. All right, and when you look at the congressmen that we have still in our communities that's been here for 50 years, I mean, I can start throwing out names like Bobby Rush. I think that we gotta really understand the power game. All right. And at the end of the day, we can't get anywhere if we hold on the seats, if we don't pass it down, if we don't have people that are fighting for the best interests of our people. Voting has to be organization, has to be structured, it has to be with an agenda and how to educate people. Every campaign should be, how do we educate people? And at the end of the day, I like what TJ said. Yeah, I definitely wish some of these folks wouldn't have voted, because we probably wouldn't be oppressed as much as we are. But now that we are where we are today, hopefully folks start zoning in on what serves the best interest in their community. And I'll leave with that. And I love all of you guys, and I appreciate all you guys for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal.
I want to bring you in, but Kim, I want to bring Kim in right quick. She has something she needs to share.
We can continue. Are we?
Okay.
We can do it at the end.
Okay.
He's speaking of
Kim Dickens.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I got wait.
So it's Kimberly Manuel Dickens, and she's the owner of Fire Rise Entertainment. We want to welcome her on. She here?
Hey, hello everybody. I am. Can you hear me?
It's a little staticky.
You froze, Kim.
Just a moment. Everything until about 2 seconds.
Rich, you can begin to bring up the presentation while she's getting ready.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. We got a storm surge here. I was trying to ring the alarms and say I might get disconnected, but we're back. So hello everyone again. Some of you may remember me from, if you participated on the last session that Ted was helping to facilitate. I'm not a panelist. Mark asked me to jump on really quickly to answer some questions around the voting process. And one of the reasons that we coined or renamed this particular follow-up session kind of emergency is because primaries are happening right now. So I'm not here to solve world hunger about voting, but I do want to provide you with some information and resources. I got a few messages in the chat saying, you know, where do we go for information? So we're going to give you some of that right now. Follow up with me after this session if you have additional questions. I'm not a political strategist. I'm just somebody who kind of knows and understands the process a little bit more because of some experiences that I've been through personally. So I love the tie together that Ted often gives when he's explaining to people who may not be as involved in the political process about how it impacts every area of our lives. And if I may give my own little anecdote about how it became crystal clear for me, some 20-some years ago when I went to college. I'm not a millennial, although Mark says I look like a baby. I'm 40-some years old. But when I went to undergrad at the University of Maryland, I was there awarded a full ride scholarship that was designed specifically and only for African Americans. It was in part to remedy some of the injustices that were happening in the state and in that institution. And long story short, myself and several other African Americans in the community received the scholarship. Well, my first day going to orientation, I had to walk by some very angry picketing and protesting non-Black folks who didn't believe that African Americans deserved that scholarship, not solely. And the issue went to the courts. It went to the Circuit Court of Virginia, I believe, where it was deemed as reverse discrimination. And then also the Supreme Court, it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court wouldn't hear it, so that decision stood. So long story short, that scholarship went away in terms of the form that it was in. So what's the tie in here? I learned how important it was going to be to vote, not just for the presidential election and for congressmen, but also for my judges, because those are the folks who decided the fate of that experience for me. I'm getting some warnings that I don't have a great connection. Can everyone still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, I can
Okay.
hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, if you can flip to the next slide, Reggie, whoever's controlling it. So elections are not only about the US president. I know that a lot of us realize that we're until that. So I don't to
Breaking up, Kim. I can't hear you.
Okay.
Is she frozen?
Yeah, I think she's frozen.
now.
Are you there, Kim?
I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, I was saying the elections are not only about the US president. We're busy. Unfortunately, only time we can get to vote, unfortunately, is during that time. But I'll go through quickly some of what ends up on ballots that's beyond Trump and or Bernie and or Joe Biden, okay? This is what happens in the primary elections and sometimes some special elections. Our congressional representatives are there, state executives, state judges, local judges, municipal officials, mayors, and school boards, and sometimes some other local positions are on our ballots. So when you hear people earlier saying, you know, who are all these names? What are all these names? This isn't even fair. Those are some of those names that are on the primary ballot. And again, some ballots that happened before that. And it's not just people, okay, who are on ballots. Also state and local measures or issue voting also appear on the ballot. So for example, taxes, healthcare, Medicaid funding, controlled substances. That was my nice way of saying our ability to vote about what was going to happen with marijuana legalization. Victims' rights legislation, transportation, education, and more. And the list goes on and on and on. And it started to become very clear to me that, again, just screaming at people to vote isn't enough. It's a message that needs to happen, but we need to educate our children and our colleagues and our peers about what's on these ballots. So you can flip to the next page. Thank you. So some sources of election information. Again, we don't have a whole lot of time to learn everything. The Illinois primaries have already passed. Our next election is going to be the general election. But if you have friends and family in states like Delaware, New Jersey, Texas, New York, I think primary is today. Kentucky, right? You can share this kind of information with folks. So all of these little icons that you see on the left-hand side of the page are all websites. You can take your pick, whichever one works for you, where you can obtain and find assistance on the voting process, candidates, important dates, et cetera. So you're going to find voter registration info and guides, early voting guidelines and dates, absentee guidelines, key election dates, candidate info. So going back to that question of, well, who are these people and what are their platforms and what do they represent? You're going to find quite a bit of information about each of the candidates on your ticket or on your ballot through these sites, polling locations, and a sample ballot. Now, I know that already sounds extremely overwhelming, but you got to start somewhere, number one. And then number two, a lot of these sites are built to give you information based on your exact location. So you're not necessarily having to filter through reams and reams and reams of pages and data. You put in your information, your address and your zip code, and the algorithms are going to take you to what's on your ballot, who is on your ballot, and what issues, if any, are on there. Some of these sites will also give you the ability to go ahead and basically create your ballot. So when you're walking in, you're not confused, you're not kerfuffled, you got your paper, you're just looking for the names. You're looking for the issue targets and you're going check, check, check. Okay, I'm out, peace. I did what I need to do. So I'm not going to sit here and say that voting is perfect. Certainly there's voter suppression. I'm not here to deny that, and we need to tackle it. But for our jurisdictions and places where we know we can get to the polls, go prepared, and there's resources to get you prepared. Next slide really quickly. I promise I would be quick with this. And Mark and Reggie, if you can make sure that people kind of get these slides in some variation or format after this, that'll be great, because I know some of this information is sinking in, but people want to go refer back to it. So upcoming election calendar, primaries. Here are the dates of all of the state primaries that are coming up, to include today. But what a lot of folks don't even realize is that they're primary runoffs. So for some primaries that have already happened, some issues and some candidates are still on the table because one of them didn't get a majority vote. So your Democrat, if you're voting Democrat, your Democratic congressperson may not be selected just yet. You still have a chance in some states to participate in that process if there's a runoff. I can't go through all of them now, but there were more than I was even anticipating are happening. I would say at least 10 states are having primary runoffs in addition to state primaries. And then, of course, the big November 3rd date that folks tend to more so know about and scream about is the national general election. So I think that's all that I had. But again, we wanted to take just a moment during tonight to address and give you guys some resources about where you can find some quick, important and valuable information on informing your vote if you are finding yourself in the position of not knowing where, who, or how.
That's great.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim. That was great information. Those slides are available. I think Reggie has it in the group where they can just email them out. And Ted, you can go ahead and take the floor.
Okay, so I want to wrap up with you guys, but in our closing here, I would like to kind of go back to what we're talking about now in terms of voting and ask each of you what are, you don't have to have multiples, you can have 1, 2, 3, whatever things you think are important given where we are right now in the country. And we're talking about, equity and equality for Black people, having a national acknowledgement of the effects of systemic racism. What are you thinking? What do you want to see in terms of agenda items from politicians? What do you think is important? I'll start with you, Lindsay, since I was talking to you before we.
Oh man, I wanted some more time to think about this, but
you can wait if somebody else is ready.
No, I'm not ready.
It's okay. I can jump in. One thing I will speak to is revolutionizing our criminal justice system. I think that a lot of people have awakened to the idea that reformation is not enough. So our governing officials need to also mimic those ideas and sentiments, that we need a revolutionary thought, a radical thought about criminal justice in America, so that we are making sure our communities are safe and not being harmed to them, if that makes sense. I would say another issue that's always dear to me, and this is just how this is my politic, is education. I think education is the foremost way by which we progress in society. And so funding education, really thinking about the way we educate our students and our Black children is monumental. And those are my issues of choice.
Next.
It's very funny because me and Lindsay had the same ones for this one. And I kind of highlighted for the education one was an article called Race in Schools, the Need for Action. And it talked about there being no significant federal funds to address issues of race in schools since the beginning of Reagan administration. And then questions that followed upon that was, we have to look at why our children end up in dead end of classes or special education. And I think that's another reason why I got into school psychology, because a lot of our students that have IEPs are African American. And I know in a lot of states now, they don't do a lot of cognitive assessments on kids that are African American of descent at all. And And then another one questioning is looking at whether the school passively accepted various forms of in-school segregation. I am a victim of racism, especially when Barack Obama got in the system. So I experienced what the Northern lifestyle is and how the Southern stuff is. So
what were those differences?
Well, up here they're a lot more friendlier than they are down south. I have never in my life been called a nigger and spit on ever until I moved down south in Tennessee. And the school systems, they're good down there, but just dealing with all the chaos was not my liking at all. Even though the South is nice, but those words like made me push myself harder to go back so that it doesn't happen to other kids I come in contact with.
Another thing I was thinking of, and just to sort of piggyback off of Lindsay and Mache, basically education, but specifically bullying. What's happening in right now, like in Louisville, Kentucky, the JSPC school system has nothing in place to protect Black children. So much so that there has been one hung himself, a young kid hung himself. Another one that I just happen to know, he's been trying to proactively get himself prepared for the bullying. So he went toward like a demonic force to help him with the bullying. And he's not back in school yet. So he was just sort of preparing himself. And his parents are sort of dealing with it now because obviously he didn't go to school. He was at the house. So those things are very important to like, they have no protection and no like brochures or things of that nature. So I think specifically bullying is an issue in the school system.
And how do you feel like we address that from a political or policy standpoint?
I think we need to put I think that goes back to knowing who's in the office, you know, who's running for the school board, you know, who's want to put, into. So I think it's a systemic issue, but I think that most importantly, it's about finding out who the people on the ballots and what they will do for that sort of issue.
You ready yet?
Oh yeah.
What you got?
That's your Morehouse boy. That's your Morehouse boy.
Okay. So yeah, certain words came to me like reform in our educational systems, definitely in terms of police brutality. I love what Lindsay said when she talked about criminal justice system, that the way by which they are enslaving us now is through, the criminal justice system, the new Jim Crow. So that education, of course, like we need to be educated about like, our politics. We need to start having conversations in our homes, like, about the kind of stuff that we're talking about right now, our elected officials, why it's important. And I don't know how this could happen, but I just feel like there needs to be a space or some sort of money or funding or something set aside for Black people to heal. Like we need some kind of like program, or we need access to like some sort of funding or something where we can go and get counseling or like, go get help, like, because we are carrying a lot of traumatic experiences. And it's literally like shaping and informing like how we interact with each other, how we interact with, with the community, the world at large. So we need to heal. And I don't know how that could happen. Maybe some of this taxpayer, like, dollars that we are, that we paying, or that they're taking from us. So reform, education, and healing, man. Black people are dope. We always been dope. We're gonna forever be dope, and we just, we need to heal. So
yeah, I have a friend who works for I don't know if I can say the company, but he works for a major corporation, and they literally offered all the Black employees time off if you need it. and therapy that they were willing to pay for.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so I think that was really great. Mark, do I have time for one more question?
Yes, you do. Yes.
So there's an idea around, it's kind of a two-part question. Actually, it's two totally different questions, so I kind of lied. So it's like kind of deep, and Kim, I know you're on the panel, but I really want to hear your thoughts on these. So there's a conversation happening around defunding the police and what that looks like. That's part one, and I want to know from you all if you agree with that idea, and if you do agree with it, what does it look like for you? And what I want to tie this whole thing up with is from Kim, from all five of you, what are your thoughts around the ideas of reparations? If you believe in it or agree with it, what does that look like? So let's start with defunding the police. Let's start whoever. Kim, you were doing other voting stuff, so you go first. Kim,
okay. Hey, Ted. So really quickly, my perspective is I think even the moniker of defunding the police has thrown the real intent of it off course a little bit. It's not necessary, or at least for most people, it's not necessarily about completely eliminating law enforcement. It's about rebalancing budgets. Given that if you look at state, local budgets across the country, you had this trend happening where more and more money was taken away from schools, healthcare, and the budgets for our law enforcement divisions were going like this, if you look at the pie chart, right? And it's like we were putting a Band-Aid on problems that should be funneling the money towards those issues and problems. So, I'm not of the notion necessarily that all law enforcement should be completely put away with and abolished. In a perfect world, that would be great. But we don't know as a society just yet how to live with some some governing forces around that. And but yeah, so that's my 2 cents about it.
Anybody else have a defund the police perspective?
I'm for it. Because I do understand, like what Kim was saying, I do understand that it's about the economics of it. Yeah, I'm in support of it. Yep.
Anybody else?
Same. So I understand the idea of like this, the idea of defund the police is not necessarily to eliminate the police, but it is to spread the funding that the police get to other institutions and systems within our community that can be more proactive in our communities. But I also think an important idea here is too that it's pushing us to reimagine what community safety and community quote unquote policing looks like. We have like been taught this idea, and BET had this special about like how policing came about through overseers on cotton fields and how like that translated into police. So
Slave Patrol.
Yeah. So I think what it's about also is reimagining what it means to provide safety for our communities.
Shay, you have a thought?
I'm down for defunding the police. Like I said, I'm a mom of a Black boy, and watching a lot of videos on social media now, when police riding by and a little boy was hiding behind a car. So I don't want my son to have to grow up and be in fear of being incarcerated by a police officer, or me having to witness him get facing police brutality. So this topic, I gotta let it go. I gotta let it go right now. it's touchy because like I said, being a mom, and then I have 2 brothers who stay down the street in Minnesota of the killing, and talking to them and seeing how they're experiencing what's going on. It's a whole different mindset of 2 boys that I've helped raise be emotionally withdrawn and become numb to it.
Kim?
I agree. I think it should be defunded, but I also think training, maybe changing the system itself and like offering a new training, just a new slate, if you will, They have like a subculture. So, they eat together. They have, so basically when they kill someone, when one kills one, they stand in solidarity because of that subculture. And I think those are the things that need to sort of be addressed and maybe retrained in that way.
Yeah, I think in Camden, I'm not sure how the viewers are, how much history they are aware of about Camden, but Camden was at a point Camden, New Jersey had a very, 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 very high crime rate. Like it was a whole problem to go to Camden. And Camden, New Jersey defunded their police.
Yes.
Deconstructed the entire policing apparatus and rebuilt it. And violent crimes have gone down in Camden 47%. They interviewed three black boys on the street who were playing basketball about the police, and they say, we love our police. They bring us ice cream, like we know them, and it's not perfect, to be clear. They still need more representation in terms of diversity, but I think the challenge is we are so acclimated to Kim Dickens' point with the way things are, like how our society exists. It's sometimes hard to imagine it not existing in this same context, right? Because people automatically say, well, if you get rid of the police, who's going to come when you call 911? Like that's not what we're saying. And if you look at what's happening in other countries, like if you look at England, like most police in England don't even have guns, right? Not to the people, but that's a different conversation. And I'm not saying our police shouldn't have guns, because that's a whole other conversation for another day. But I do think reimagining what policing looks like is something we have to do. And people are getting tripped up on defund. But what's interesting is that we don't get tripped up when they're defunding education.
Exactly.
Defunding, social services, when they're defunding all the other things.
Exactly.
Nobody's like education's going away because they're defunding it. We don't think that. But when it comes to defunding police, for some reason, all people think that's an eradication of the police, but that's not at all what's happening. It's more of a reallocating of funds and a reimagining what public safety looks like in our community. Lastly, before we go, quickly, if you all have thoughts on if you support reparations, that's a yes or no. If you do, what does that look like to you? I guess I'll go down because Kim, you're first in my thing. Kim, Stag. Kim? No? You're on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Kim Stag, I think he wants you, not me.
Well, Kim, Kim,
go ahead. Kim, go ahead, Kim Dickens.
Okay. I'll make it quick. I absolutely believe that something should be done in terms of the various solutions and formats for it. I don't know. I think there's an opportunity to be creative. I loved what someone suggested from the entertainment world. I can't remember who it was anymore, but somebody was just like, Black people shouldn't pay taxes anymore. Period. If you're looking for an easy way where you don't have to do a bunch of calculations and go find 40 acres and a mule, we just not going to pay taxes anymore. I'm being a little bit facetious, but I don't think the problem is as hard as some would make it out to be. The reality is there are people and forces in this country who do not want us to be on equal footing. They don't want us to be without that element, Ted, that you talk about a lot. It's called classism, whether you're white, Black, or other. But get to voting and start demanding some issues on the ballot. And let me go back to this long-term game. That's what our opposers do quite well. Mm-hmm. I want to tell every millennial on this call, or every person who just hasn't voted, or they vote and they got discouraged because things didn't change right away. Things never in this country change right away. You have to be in it for your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren, and know that every step is towards something else. So you missed the primaries in Illinois. Get ready for the next set. Vote on November 3rd, and then start researching who in your immediate vicinity is thinking about running for office. Understand what their platforms are. Get them the funding. That's how this thing works. And again, it's a long tail game. It's a long battle. So,
thank you. Kim, Stag?
Back. Sorry.
No worries.
I agree. I think some sort of fund, or we definitely need help. And I think going back to what Kim said, it's systemic. So we can't fix it overnight. You know, it's got to be a piece by piece, progressive sort of movement in order for us to really see progress.
Shay?
I agree with both Kims. It's gonna take time. And I feel like just the way that we're doing peaceful protests and marching the streets, we have to do the same thing for what's very important right now. Defunding the police and making sure that our voices are heard. So I agree with everything that's said.
Lindsay?
In terms of reparations, I want to say yes. As long as our wealth is not devoured by American capitalism, I fear, money, capital being given to people, only to be at the hands of a system which sucks up the wealth from the middle class and the impoverished people. My idea of reparations truly would be systems and structures that provide access and equity to people of color so that we can sustain wealth.
Love it. My brother?
Yeah. I agree. I agree with Lindsay. I believe the psychology of, Black people here in America is one thing that would, like, say, for instance, if they just cashed us out, just gave us, all this money, was like, here, that money would leave out of our community so fast, like it would like make our head spin. So definitely something that is definitely a system or something that is in place that provides equal opportunity, for Black people to get ahead. Otherwise, if it was a different form of reparations, it would be counterproductive, for the Black community.
So thank you all for those answers. I have my reparations idea is multi-pronged. It kind of incorporates what everybody said. I think Black people should be exempt from state and federal taxes for a certain period of time, specifically like the state, because I learned 2 years ago that the state of South Carolina would lease slaves to white people who were too poor to own slaves. So the state literally made money off of enslaved Africans, which is something I was never taught and never even knew. And I'm sure there were probably more than just that state. So that's my number one. Number two, I think that Black people should have free four-year college at whatever state college they want to go to. I think that Black people should have zero interest home loans. I think that we should have, now, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to, but I think Black people should have, in the states where it's legal, i.e. Illinois, Black people there should be a guaranteed percentage of ownership for Black people in legal cannabis. Whatever that number is, I don't know the number, but if it's 15, 20, 30%, especially since y'all been putting us in jail for ever, like there should be a certain percentage of ownership that's guaranteed to Black people. Of the tax revenue that comes from legal cannabis in the states where it's legal, a percentage of that should be guaranteed to Black communities for upbuild in our communities, for investments, for businesses, for tutoring centers, for educational, whatever we want to do in our own communities. We should have a guaranteed percentage of that is funneled to our communities as well, because I don't think, to everybody's point, like just a check is the answer. So we have to have ways that we're getting other things out of it in terms of education and equity and land and other things that you use to develop wealth in this country. So anyway, thank you all for a really engaging, great conversation. Mark, Reggie, thank you guys for asking me to be a part of this conversation. It was my pleasure. I learned a lot. Hope other people did. And I'm really inspired by everyone on this call. All of you, I think, bring a certain level of passion and heart and experience and intellect and nuance to the conversation that we all need and that we all can grow from. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
you, Mark.
you.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Reggie.
Kim?
Go ahead.
Oh, again, thank you guys for being a part. Again, thank you to all our panelists, our host for tonight, Kamara Staggers. Thank you so much for hosting tonight. Our moderator Ted. Thank you so much to all our panelists, Lindsay, TJ, Shay, Jason, and Jamal. Thank you guys for such an enlightening conversation. It was so great. I mean, really, really, really enlightening, and so guys are so full of knowledge. Ted was like, "Can we do it again?" I mean, yes, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. Wish more people were in the room, but we definitely know we had a great audience on all of our social platforms. So we had it on every platform: Facebook, Twitch, YouTube. So it's all over the place. So we had a good audience out there. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation. We will definitely do it again. Listen, we have a lot of more events going on. So please go to our website, www. Why do I always say that? Who says www again? Who does that? God, Jesus Christ. Yeah, this is working, right? Go to.
You were live before the internet.
Huh? Watch it.
Well, I was too, but I'm just saying people say www when you, because that's how it used to be.
But go to that website, nextshowcaseusa.com. Again, that's nextshowcaseusa.com. And then it's under construction right now, but it will definitely lead you to a couple of tabs so we can show you where all our information is for our different concerts and events are going on. So listen, guys. If you guys enjoyed again, we want to continue to provide these platforms. Thank you guys to all that already have given and donated. Please donate to our, so we continue to have these type of platforms. We definitely appreciate it. We love all your support. Again, we are at the 902 hour. We hit it, Ted. 2 minutes off. We did the 2 hours. We got it. TJ, new life.
New life.
There you go. Ted, new life. Rodney, new life. New life in the house. I had to shout out my church. I'm sorry, guys. I had to shout out. They're all in the house. You know what I'm saying? I had to shout it out. You know what I'm saying?
Denise Holmes, Kristen Ellis. Yeah, we got a couple people in here. New life.
There you go. We had to shout out my church. You know what I'm saying? But and thank you to my incredible staff, Lady D, and our COO, Chief of Operation Officer, Brother Reg. Thank you so very much for everything. He's left and right hand man. So thank you so much for everything you do. To Kim. Dick is one of our main supporters and sponsors. We appreciate everything that you bring to the table. Thank you, Shay, for the PowerPoint presentation. We really appreciate that. And again, thank you, Kim, for hosting. Everybody have a good night. We love you guys. And we see you next time. Peace.